Hello and welcome to season 2, episode 1 of Kitchen Table Progressives. That's right, we have a new season and a new name. My name is still the same. Well, actually, it's kind of different. It's just Joyce Nance, and this is my co anchor.
Yeah, and my name is still the same as it was too when I was born, Paul Richardson.
Yeah, we could call Mr. Snarky, but we're going to save
Well, I
that
mean,
for after the show.
I know. Here, it's you're supposed to be able to do all the professional comedy around here, aren't you?
We'll have to do the professional comedy. All right. Okay. All right. Well, you didn't tell me
I
that.
I do the wonky kitchen table analysis.
I see. Okay. Well, all right. Well, go ahead. I'll do the best I can, and I hope you do the same. So today
No,
we're going to talk about guns, and Paul's going to lead it off.
Oh, I'm going to leave that. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I mean, again, we have more shootings now this year than there are days of the year in 2023, and it's like things never change here in America. The shootings in California, well, it's crazy. And one thing that sticks out to me is that victims of gun violence have absolutely no redress. I mean, how long have we been, we've heard the Republicans, I mean, it just goes forever and ever. The Democrats, they only care about the rights of the accused. What about the rights of the victims? And they just go with this. That you can hear just about any one of them screaming like that about victims' rights, and they still scream about it because, in the last election it was all about Democrats and the increased crime. I guess that means there's victims, but when it comes to gun violence, victims have no redress, none. There's nothing. As a victim of gun violence, should you survive it, there's really nothing you have nowhere to go, because.
Well, I do believe that's true of all violence in regard to victims.
Well, that's, but the only difference is there is in just a little bit of legal wonkiness is that in order to have legal standing, you so should you qualify jurisdictionally in a court, you have to have an injury, there has to be a cause or someone responsible, and there has to be redress that the court can order. Now, in any kind of violent crime, that's true, is that the perpetrator probably doesn't have, first of all, will be criminally indicted if they're caught. And that doesn't really do anything to help victims, no matter what kind of crime. That's true. But victims have no redress civilly because we have no liability laws for the gun industry. I mean, we've probably talked about this before, but the gun industry there's a federal law that exempts them from strict product liability, which is the external damages that their product causes as for any product, and every single product sold in America is subject to strict product liability, which means if it causes damage, the company has to pay for it. That's called internalizing the costs and every product causes some damage. There's some liability from, whatever. I always like to use the example of a pizza. I mean, if you get a pizza that has a sliced olive pit on it and you bite into it because you ordered olives on your pizza, or somehow it got on your pizza and you break your tooth, the pizza place is liable to pay for it. And there's no argument. There's just, did the olive cause the breakage of the tooth? And if it did, what was the cause? There was an injury and there's a cause, therefore strict product liability applies. And so what they do,
well, you know what, not to argue with you, but there is always an argument about liability, but it gets resolved.
It depends on. Yeah, they may argue that this was not our cause, but if it's found to be the cause, and the product was being used as as it was supposed to be used, then then there's the company has to pay. That's why what they do to internalize the costs of liability is to set aside a certain amount of money, like throw on a couple, charge an extra, couple of pennies on a pizza for, it doesn't happen very often. So they only have a few liability cases to settle on a broken tooth. But it does happen and they have to pay for it.
For pizza. But
yeah, for pizza.
Each product varies in its liability.
Right. It's very low.
Well, not each product. Some products are high.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
and
cigarettes.
They have to, that's why they charge more money for them. So when you have high liability, they have to set aside more money for the liability cases. And
well, but not only that, cigarettes are taxed. I don't know if it's double or triple. It's a huge amount. Mm-hmm. They used to be like almost nothing to buy a pack of cigarettes, and now
or over $10 now.
Are they $10 for a pack?
The last time I had a friend who I was with at the store with her, and she bought a pack of cigarettes. This is about it's quite a few years ago. I'm thinking probably, I don't know, more than 5 years ago. It was, she paid like 10 something for the pack of cigarettes.
Right. So that is definitely probably at least 50% tax.
But the other point of this is, this doesn't make a product illegal if it causes damage. There's internalizing costs to the manufacturers, and there's also legislation that can be passed that's kind of, because product liability is a sort of after the fact. Your product, like the exploding gas tanks that Ford had, and that on the Ford Pinto back in the 70s, that was one where if the gas tank explodes and you get seriously burned, that's a kind of after the fact. So legislatures can pass laws to require that certain things that are made, meet certain standards. A good example.
For some things like that. For some things like that, they do, but they haven't done anything to make cigarettes safer.
That's right, and this is look, they haven't done anything to make guns safer, except
Well, I mean, they're kissing cousins, but cigarettes have the big warning on it. I do not believe the guns come with any warning that they cause death. But cigarettes say it will cause death. I don't even think it beats around the bush like it might. No, it will.
No. Well, see, all of this is a matter of politics. I mean, politics is the architectonic science. Everything that we understand first through politics. We understand justice through politics. This is a matter of politics, and the cigarette industry kind of lost a few battles through back in 2000.
Yeah, they were sued and
they lost billions of dollars, and so they had to make these concessions to put these warnings on. But not only has the gun industry not been sued, they've been given carte blanche in federal law. And one of the problems with that is that states can still make liability laws for guns, but the problem is, because there's joint jurisdiction with federal law, is that the gun industry, much like what happened with the car industry, they have cases that are brought in state court, removed to federal court jurisdictionally, and then they get thrown out. So, and then there's claim preclusion, so they can't be sued again. So there's no redress for the victims to get any kind of, let's say you're shot and you're not dead. I guess we have the assumption that, since you're not dead, you just get up and go home for dinner, like we did when we played, cops and robbers when we were kids. I got to go now, and you get up and no, if you get shot with a bullet, chances are that part of your body, if you survive, is damaged for the rest of your life.
Yep.
It rips your muscles apart. If it goes into your torso, it rips into your organs, and that's it. So you are entitled to some redress, some damage, some liability damages, and the gun industry has been let go on that. And that's not just that industry. We could have liability laws that apply to allowing someone who shouldn't get a gun to get one. We could apply financial and property forfeitures like they do with drug dealers. But we don't have any, and these are all civil laws that have nothing to do with the Second Amendment, and the Supreme Court couldn't say anything about them. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. You can still buy a gun, you can still get it. But the thing is, you talk about cigarettes, is as prices went up, people started quitting. So it did have its effect. They didn't sell as many. And so they had to raise their, if they wanted to keep their profits, they had to raise their prices more for the addiction. And that just causes more people to quit. I had lots of friends, not a lot, but several friends who smoked for a long time, who like 30 years, who quit. Finally said, that's enough. It's too damn expensive. And it's just, all I do is cough anyway. And guns, to see that if guns had to be, if the cost of their liability of some of these types of weapons were internalized, they would have to raise the price on them to cover that. And you would not find these punks who don't really have any money able to afford a AR-15. Shouldn't be $750. It should be 5 times that much. Should be a $3,500 gun.
Yeah, they're even where they do have laws, like the 3-day waiting period or whatever. I don't even know how it makes any sense, but they have those gun show loopholes, which are insane. I went to a gun show one time because I wanted to see a particular gun. Because it was in one of the books I was writing about it. One of the criminals had used it, and I wanted to see what it looked like in person and what it felt like.
Yeah.
It was a Tech 9, which is a gangster gun that they actually used in Columbine and some other famous mass shootings. And somebody there had one, and I held it, and it just gave me the creeps.
Mhm.
And it was heavy. And the guy's like, you want to buy it? And I'm like, because I didn't want to tell him what I was there for. I was like, oh, well, I'm thinking, and he's like, well, if you give me $250 cash right now, you can walk away with it. And I'm like, okay,
Really?
I will be thinking.
Oh, yeah. So he'll take anything.
Yeah,
And
he was just going to take it. He didn't care who I was or who I was going to do, what I was going to do with it. No background check. I could have just, got out of my car from a previous mass shooting and pick up another gun.
well, and that's why I think we should have liability laws. Definitely have liability laws against for gun shows. If you sell a gun to somebody at a gun show without a background check, then you are liable in every financial way. You can be sued for. You could be sued for literally millions and millions. And the other thing is
that would be the end of gun shows.
Okay, good.
That
You know what?
I know that.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Here's the point. Okay, so do you remember those things, lawn darts, the jarts?
Yeah.
Things that you throw, and they're
Big,
like
giant ones. Yeah.
darts, and you throw them in this hoop. Out,
Yeah.
you put the hoop out on the lawn. Okay, these things went out, I think, probably back in the late 70s. It seems to me, because what happened was some people, adults were playing lawn darts in the backyard, and the kids were running around. And I don't know if the girl ran, across the field of play, but a dart was thrown and it hit her in the head and punctured her skull, and she died.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Strict liability says that, and they did, the company had to pay for the death of that child. I don't know how much they had to pay, but here's the point.
A lot. Yep.
It's not that it outlawed, there was no law against lawn darts.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the company decided, and the company probably makes lots of other types of outdoor games. They probably make horseshoes and all stuff like that. They decided that the liability, to internalize the cost of the liability of lawn darts, it's not worth it. You can't make a profit on it because you'd have to raise the price of lawn darts to the point where no one would buy them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they don't make them. Okay, so that's the point. Is if they have liability on these AR-15s and these high capacity guns, then they would be so expensive they'd stop selling them.
Well, but Paul, just not to be argumentative, but
please do be argumentative. This is the kitchen table, after all.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm arguing, and I am actually sitting at my kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, cars are accidentally kill people all day, every day. Mm-hmm. And they have not become so expensive that you can't afford them, either the car itself or the insurance, which guns don't have. But and people do intentionally kill other people with cars, but usually it's accidental. And why are they allowed to proceed unscathed, basically?
Well, I think it has to do with what was the actual proximate cause of the. It's not just if you're driving your car. The proximate cause is not that the car was made. The proximate cause may be the actual driver, and then in that case, it's not the car that has to go up. It's the driver, and the insurance company the driver's insurance has to pay for it. So in that case,
when you compare it to the jarts, the actual thing didn't do anything wrong. It was the person that threw it.
No, it wasn't even the person that threw it. No, the liability was the proximate cause of the death was the jart punctured the girl.
No, I get that, but there's no difference in if your car bashes into somebody else's car and kills the kid.
No, but in that case, there is the misuse of the car. In other words, if you were speeding, if you were breaking a law, there's
you don't even have to be breaking a law to kill people in cars. You can just hit a patch of ice and the brakes don't work anymore, and then you hit somebody.
Right. Okay. So then how do you then you don't have a clear case of cause that the
but the insurance would still pay as if you did it intentionally.
Well, I don't know the way insurance works. It has there's different ways in terms of injury to the other party. I mean, there is often somebody has to be found at fault, and it does come down to that. I mean, I think in that case you'd have a hard time proving that the car was the proximate cause. Whereas when you look at guns, is that there's in every single gun death, and the proximate cause is ballistic trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I know, but I mean, people accidentally shoot either themselves or someone in the room. This happens way too often, I think, when they're cleaning their gun. There's no intent whatsoever. They didn't mean to do it. It's a horrible accident. But still, it's just the lethalness of the instrument.
That's true. And that's why strict product liability that doctrine was formed. And it had to do with first a case in 1852 where there was some mislabeled poison, and the court ruled that anything that's inherently dangerous, the liability lies with the manufacturer. And then back in 1916, Benjamin Cardozo, the great American jurist who was a Supreme Court justice, ruled that any injury makes the product inherently dangerous. And so there's going to be argument about the causation, and that's why you're right. There will always, if there's some question about the causation, that's what attorneys will argue, and they will have to convince a jury that there was a proximate cause. But what we have here is there is a double standard, whereas it's okay if I shoot you because you're breaking into my house, but if a criminal shoots you, like a mass shooter shoots you, well, you got no redress. I mean, you just it's, in other words, it's like it's the intent, and it's not the intent that counts. It's whether the product was being used as it was intended, and the intention of a gun is to cause ballistic injury. And if it doesn't matter if the person is a criminal who's trying to do it, the intent is not the point. And a good kind of comparison would be that hunting rifles are rarely used in these shootings, and therefore their liability would still be very, very low, because they just don't happen. That's not what people choose to use when they want to shoot somebody, because they basically are one or two shots, and that's all you get. It's kind of like the statistics, the actuary of insurance. If you happen to be, I think, what is it? The Chevy, the Camaro, and the Camry, Toyota Camry are the two most stolen cars in America, and so consequently they have higher insurance. It's not that there's anything about the cars. It's just statistically, they are the most stolen cars. So if you buy one of those, you're going to pay more insurance for them. That's the way it works. But the thing is, doesn't it seem absolutely ridiculous that if you're the victim of a shooting and you happen to live, actually living victims get higher payments than dead ones, the families of dead victims. But if you're a victim, you can't get anything out of anybody. If the shooter is probably going to be prosecuted if they're still alive, didn't kill themselves, and they're going to go to jail. So they have no money for you now that you're shot and you can't work because you have all kinds of problems with you're disabled. You are now permanently disabled. And
well, I mean, it just depends on the situation because they do get money. Depends on the situation. Sometimes it's people's homeowners insurance pay for it. Sometimes the business where it happens, if it happens at a business, it just depends.
Well, that's true.
If there's any pocket to dig into.
Right. But that's, again, now you're hitting other, the question is, which is the most proximate liability. And I'm saying that the manufacturers of guns are not going to be even looked at. They won't be looked at all as being, and it's not a matter, people also think that, well, yeah, if the gun malfunctions and causes injury. No. Well, other products don't have to malfunction.
Well, okay, but how about this?
Mm-hmm.
And here in the United States, the government agrees that having these kind of guns is okay. And so the guns exist.
Yeah.
And they could exist in other countries, but the governments don't agree that having them is a good idea. So thus, there is, infinitely less amount of these horrible kinds of shootings, and even being the risk of being shot by one if someone gets mad at you because they're just not there. So maybe people should be looking to the people that are allowing this to happen as someone to sue. I mean, I'm sure there's you're protected in Congress, but maybe there's a loophole, or maybe somebody can come up with a legislation that says, you don't have qualified immunity from the laws that you passed that just wiped out this entire school kid's second grade class.
Well, that'd be called official immunity for legislators.
Okay, well, whatever they call it,
they have official immunity for the crappy laws they pass, and okay, but I'm trying to say
the ones that are. I mean, that wouldn't happen without the equipment, but the equipment is not allowed in a whole bunch of other places, and thus it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's a legitimate discussion, but you can see that that's a slightly different. It's not slightly. It's a different venue from liability. It's the where the government can also regulate products and say that product, no, we're not going to even allow that.
They do for every other product. They even legislate safety for cars if they, the gas tank blows up or whatever. But
that's what I was saying is liability is the ex post facto part of product protection. Is, in other words, liability. That thing ripped off my face. Well, that's a little late to have to sue you now. That's why there's two sides of it. Absolutely, there's the legislative side which is preemptive, and there's the liability side, which is kind of post facto.
Right. And so what I was going to bring up before, and I'll probably have to do it a different time, which is the gun laws that they have in each state. Like, for instance, just like the tip of the iceberg, I've got Alabama up here. In Alabama, if you're looking for any kind of gun protection, do not go to Alabama. Well, here's like some of them, and they break it down with long gun and handgun, but just understand that it's the same answer to both of them. State permit required to purchase? No. Firearm registration? No. Assault weapon law? No.
No.
Magazine capacity restriction, no.
No.
Owner license required, no. Permit
No.
required for concealed carry, not even anything for concealed carry, no. Permit for open carry, no. Castle doctrine, stand your ground law,
Yeah.
hell yes. State.
Yeah. Okay. But this is a good point, because in my view, the Second Amendment would say that state legislatures can regulate guns as freely or as strictly as the legislature shall desire. But that means they can have a Wild West Alabama. What is it? Alabama? You're saying?
Yeah, that was Alabama.
Okay. Or, and this is what the Supreme Court took away, or they should be able to regulate guns very strictly. In the original part of the Second Amendment, and if I just want to go over this, because the Second Amendment has 4 clauses. Number 1, it says, a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the people's right to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. So, in other words, when you read that, if it really meant that states shouldn't be able to regulate guns strictly, the Second Amendment would say, and no, it only applies to the federal government, it would just say, the people's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No commas. It's just one simple sentence. But those first 2 clauses, those are conditional.
Qualifiers. Yep.
Exactly. And they said a well-regulated why would you bring up, if you're going to write a decent sentence? That's like I've said. I wrote an article that started out that this is either the best or worst written sentence in American governance. I mean, because it's either clear or it's not. And why would you start with a clause that says a well-regulated militia? Okay, I'm listening. And being necessary. Okay, this being a second clause, being necessary to the security of a free state. Okay, so in other words, you're saying we need a little militia, to free the state. The people's right to keep and bear arms. Then that's another clause, and then it says the predicate is shall not be infringed. But that's conveyed by these other first 2 clauses. That's what applies the first 2 conditions, and that otherwise it would just say the people's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No commas, just a period at the end. That's all there is. Period. But that's not what it says. And the Supreme Court has taken away, to a large degree, and they just did last year, ruled that the state of New York didn't have the right to, didn't have the power to regulate concealed carry by asking what reason do you have for needing a concealed carry gun. That's too invasive. But that's not what that has nothing to do. That's not what you get out of the Second Amendment. So basically the Heller versus DC and McDonald versus Chicago decisions. The first one made it a fundamental right of constitutional right, which, by the way, not all rights in the Bill of Rights are fundamental. The 7th Amendment has been found not to be sufficiently fundamental to apply to the states. And the second one, McDonald versus Chicago, used the 14th Amendment to impose equal protection, which is kind of funny because it was passed by Samuel Alito, who's the big originalist guy, right? Well, I tell you what, if you're an originalist, you don't use the 14th Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
they're just like Bible people. They pick and choose.
That's true. They're chapter and verse barkers.
Yeah, right. So, anyways, yeah. But I did want to say, but California, all those questions are almost all the opposite answer of Alabama, and as we know, California had a terrible week this week, and so it didn't stop the guns from coming into their state, because why would it? You drive right from Nevada in and all the adjoining states, but it does slow it down to some extent, and I think the suicide by gun is half of what it is in a state like Alabama. So
right,
it does save lives, not as many as you'd like, and it would be a whole lot more if all the states had, which they do not ban guns in California. They just have regulations.
Well, here's another thing that cracks me up about, doesn't crack me up. It really, I hate that term, but it's puzzling, is that the right wingers say things like, well, if somebody wants to shoot themselves, commit suicide, who can do anything about that? Well, but that's murder. I mean, that's self-murder. That's so that, in other words, they think the state has an interest in preventing a woman from making reproductive choice by having an abortion,
Mhm.
which they call murder, but they
Mhm.
don't think they have an interest in protecting somebody from committing murder against themselves. Well, what if a woman is pregnant and she just feels so bad about it, she's going to get a gun and kill herself? Wouldn't she then also be killing the fetus?
She would,
Yeah.
but if you are not alive, it's hard to charge you. But
That's
um,
true, but you still have an interest.
well,
If you have an interest in protecting
well,
life,
yeah, those people, the anti-abortion people, I refuse to call them right to life when they promote guns. So I think that needs to be erased.
well, do you remember the case that in Texas, and this was when George W. Bush was running for president, and in the debate with Al Gore, and Al Gore brought up the murder of what was his name? Robert Byrd. He was a black man down in Texas who they dragged him behind a pickup truck,
Right.
and they dragged him, they tied him to a pickup truck and
Yeah.
dragged him, and his
I
head
remember.
came off, and it was just horrible, and George W. Bush said, and you know what's going to happen to them? They're going to get capital punishment. And I'm like, well, big freaking deal. What about Mr. Byrd, right? I mean, that's a little after the fact too. That's kind of like product liability. A little after the fact, that, oh, well, I bet Mr. Byrd is very happy that they're going to get capital punishment.
Uh-huh.
Well,
the arguments are just sideways at best. But in any case, guess what?
Oh.
We have come to the end of episode 1, season 2 of Kitchen Table Progressives. And we're going to have to say goodbye. So I'm Joyce Nance, and this is
Paul Richardson.
and we'll see you next week.